Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I thought the system was confusing before the meeting. Chairman Adolph, I had a significant number of questions. Since some of the answers have generated more questions, stop me when you think it's necessary, and I'll come back for the second round. Mr. Chairman or Mr. Metzger, do you recognize these documents?
Yes.
Yes.
It's my understanding, I've been on the Appropriations Committee now for, I think, approximately 6 years. And as part of the budget process, every department or agency, including yours that comes before us, approximately in October, submits documents such as this to the governor's office, and then they're sent over to minority and majority staff to review, regardless of what department it is. And this was signed by John Metzger, October 2nd, 2014. These are the numbers that we are basing our questions on. So if these aren't the correct numbers, the paperwork that you signed, that you sent to the governor's office, that we met on and are basing our questions on, would you please get us the correct information? I mean, we've been working on legislation here for years, right? And we passed a bill in the House, stood up on the House floor and made comments on numbers that were provided that you claim is an internal document. So I don't think it's very internal when it's been processed the same way over the years. Now, if it's not the right document, then please get it to us as soon as possible. Okay, that's a comment as it relates to these.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
As the former chairman, just let me clear something up for the committee. The numbers that are being confusing to me, maybe as I listen, are not the numbers in those reports. What had happened is back in September, there was an internal memo that I asked for because there was concern that we had that basically our profits would be eaten up by expenses. And the expenses, chiefly in my concern, were salaries due to new contracts and pension and benefits. And back then, the pension issues were very difficult because obviously we were getting out of a recession and the earning on your accounts was very, very minimal. And as people retired, we had concerns that we had to keep providing that additional funds. And obviously the PLCB, as a retail store, earns its own revenue and then it has to pay its share of the pensions of state employees over. I asked for that memo because I thought that the then board would then be able to take a look at it and make real decisions on how we would handle things going forward. When I received that memo, I had asked that that memo stay internally because I felt that that memo at that point in time had to be verified, and it was one of those memos that was put together by financing, given to us, and then in turn talked about and put aside as we were going to end our fiscal year. What occurred at that point in time is the memo was, I'll use this word, leaked across the street and leaked to the press, and it became a very large newspaper story at that point. And we didn't have a chance to verify that or not as to whether that were real numbers or not. What occurred at that point was as interest rates started to increase and we started to realize that the pension would not be a black hole like it was during the recession periods, we started to change our numbers a little bit. And I think that's what the current chairman is trying to talk about. So we're not suggesting that that document that you have there, that is our financials that you're given at the end of the fiscal year, is incorrect. What we're suggesting is that this memo that, should be honest with you, never left our building because we weren't quite sure whether those numbers were correct or not, are the verification of us losing enough money not to be profitable.
Sir, I appreciate that explanation, but if you wouldn't mind pretending to be in our seats for a minute, when we're given a document that says in 2018 and 19, you're going to have a cash balance of minus $46 million. That, you know, that says something, right? And I hear what you're saying. Miraculously, the memo shouldn't have been released, and miraculously, numbers changed. But the way the process has worked for years around here, and I know you don't want to acknowledge it. Thank you. The way the process has worked around here is this is what we base the reports off of.
No, I'm happy to acknowledge it. I was just trying to explain the other document that has caused concern here at that point. Representative, I'm more on your side as you think, but the truth of the matter is, I also want my colleagues that are around me to be fairly discussed with you with regard to the issues in hand. I am the old chairman. I will take that blame for asking for that to be put in writing and to show me that I was going to not be embarrassed years to come by a negative cash flow.
But I don't think, sir.
Representative.
Yes, sir.
We never saw the leaked document.
Okay.
The only thing that we saw was the budget information sent to us from your office.
Fair, Bill.
Okay. And it's very confusing, but that leak information we never saw. We never saw an internal memo. And the whole hearing started off with the chairman saying, don't base the information on a leaked document that should have never left that building. We never saw that. All we're basing all our figures on is the pamphlet, the budget information that was sent to the governor's office and sent to all four caucuses. That's all. So, I understand where you're coming from, all right? But you have to understand where we're coming from. We base our estimates only on numbers that you give us, not the leaked information.
And
Just that. So I had to intervene so we get back, and Representative Mustio did a great job, and I hope we all understand we didn't base our numbers on an internal leaked document. We based it upon appropriation budget information given us by you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Bryan, I'm more on your side than you might think, too. If I can get back to my original line of questioning and comments, in the testimony that you provided to the committee, you said that your staff processes 27,000 liquor licenses statewide, and I want to tell you that your staff does a tremendous job. I can tell you that any time that my office is approached by whether it's a business in my district or outside of my district for help with getting expedited inspection, liquor license processed, there is no doubt that your team is on the ball and gets the work done. 100%. Never have to call back. In fact, they call back and say, hey, this is what the status is. So your team should be certainly complimented on that.
Thank you, sir, because we have a hardworking team that are dedicated employees, so thank you.
And hearing about the e-processing opportunities, I think will even expedite that ability to serve the customer.
Your licensing director is sitting right behind me.
Kudos to the licensing director. I did have one question for you, Mr. Metzger. Earlier, I was a little bit confused when you said there's been the word profit used. Then I heard you say cash transfer. Technically, it's cash coming off the balance sheet. Is that right?
That's correct.
So it's not technically...
Well, it originated from profit, yes. But it's then cash sitting there that we then transfer whenever the governor asks for it.
And sometimes you get asked for a little bit more than might be there.
It has happened in past years.
Correct, right. Now, in reading the governor's budget summary, there were some comments in there regarding modernization and increased revenues. And my questions now relate to the LCB hearing, or I'm sorry, LCB decision of March 6th that we touched on briefly earlier. Because I'm going to have some questions surrounding that as it relates to some other items. Not from a negative standpoint, but maybe for some opportunity. And they're just questions, if you would bear with me. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that Charlie Caputo is probably a heck of a liquor attorney. And
That's what I hear.
yes. So the original decision, if I'm interpreting this correctly, and I'm not an attorney, in the cover letter it said, while questions have previously been raised regarding various configurations of beer, this is the first time the board has been confronted with this particular inquiry in the context of a sale in an original container. And this relates to breaking a case down to 12 packs. In the next to last paragraph, it says, therefore, it would be permissible for the brewery to sell the container to licensed distributors. Distributors and importing distributors are not permitted, however, to break apart such a container into smaller units for resale. Now, there was a newspaper article yesterday in the Post-Gazette that indicates that that sentence has been changed, I guess, based on the fact that there are UPC symbols on each of the individually wrapped 12 packs.
Yeah,
so they
cases
can break
basically-
it as long as they're individual, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I guess the reason I bring that up is these types of decisions, as you know, anytime we tinker with one part of the liquor distribution system, creates, heart attacks in other parts with other licensees. So my questions now relate to the privatization and versus modernization, because you touched on that in your testimony as well. Under the modernization, is it possible for a customer to buy 12 bottles of wine at a grocery store?
No, the grocery store.
Under six bottles.
Excuse me?
6 bottles under modernization.
At a grocery store?
Correct.
No,
Okay.
no wine.
And, well, they can buy wine at a grocery store.
No.
I was told by a supporter that wants to keep things status quo, you could buy a bottle of wine at a grocery store if they have a restaurant license. You can uncork it there and take it home.
No.
That is true.
That's true?
That's true.
That is, Representative, that is true if they have a restaurant license.
Correct. Right. Okay. So Chairman Costa mentioned earlier growlers in a beer distributor, but that's not included in this modernization proposal either, I don't believe. Beer or wine in convenience stores.
If they have an R license and a seating for 30 people and have food available.
So they have to have an R license at this
Yes.
point. Okay, so that really is status quo, nothing under modernization there. Is there the ability, getting back to the questions that have never been asked, is there the ability for the LCB to license a private sector, license a grocery store to sell wine and liquor, or just wine, in a remote section of the state that maybe has a current state store that is open only partially during the week, like Tuesdays and Thursdays?
Not in current law.
Not in current law. For sure. I mean, if I'd asked last year if we could break a case up, it wouldn't have been in current law, right? Somebody, Representative Dean, talked about Sunday sales. In your testimony, this is another thing that confuses me a little bit. Current law, I think, says 25% of the stores, right?
Correct.
Why are you operating 29% of the stores on Sundays?
I probably should take that question because that was under my watch. The difficulty that we have is, as we were modernizing stores and changing stores around and reducing the amount of stores, when I became chairman of the PLCB back in 2011, there were 611 stores at that point in time. There are now 603. The difficulty that we ran into is, as you were to take 2 stores that were smaller stores and modernize and move them into one larger store, either it be a premium store or a newly remodeled store like we had talked about earlier today, what would occur is those stores, with the cost of the equipment and the cost of the refit, would be open on Sunday. It was not logical for me to suggest that those stores would not be open on Sunday. So you would take those 2 stores, you would move it to one, but then you would reduce the amount of our stores. So then we go down eventually to 603 stores. In order to meet the math, you would have to start closing stores, Representative, that were already open. And I had talked to a few of the members here, as well as a few of the members in the Senate, and obviously nobody wanted the stores in their districts closed. Then what occurred also was, as we opened new stores, the consumers started to suggest that they wanted those stores open and not close them. So it became really an issue as to satisfying the citizens of the Commonwealth, dealing with a 25% rule that I called it in the legislation, and then trying to create a better system where the stores were more profitable because of the new retail experience that people had, which was for the consumers as well. So I wrestle with that on a continual basis, and I know that we are over the mark at this point in time by about 24 stores, but when you look at where those 24 stores are, and the people were used to using those stores, it was difficult just to put a sign on the front and say, in order to meet a 25% rule in the legislation, this store is no longer open.
And if I could just give an example, we just opened a store in Dillsburg, an underserved area with a growing population. That's great. And we made a decision to keep that store open on Sunday. If we would not have made that decision, that growing populated area, consumers would have to either drive to Gettysburg or Lemoyne, and we made a decision to keep it open.
So, I mean, it was really a decision that I made as chairman. I mean, Sunday is now with people that have a husband and a wife working in a family. It is the second largest shopping day of the week, and it just seemed to me that for the convenience of our citizens, we would not start closing stores. We don't actively decide to open a store, but that occurred just by mathematical reduction of the amount of stores, and then stores that were remodeled and moved to a different location.
Yeah, I understand the math. You understand that there's a law, and we have other licensees that are operating with certain regulations and laws too that you're going to enforce. So I just leave that out there where it is. We talked, this is my last question, earlier about bulk buying, and I guess I wanted to see if we can dig a little deeper into that, and I'm not sure who would answer this question, but it's my understanding that a lot of what would be called in other states wholesalers, you know, the Southern Wines of the world, those types of companies, have agreements with manufacturers for certain areas where they are the sole source, if you want to call that. So how does your bulk buying decision or idea play into that?
Well, Representative, we don't bulk buy. What we do is we have twice a year, any supplier in the world is permitted to offer new items to us. And then based on the sales projections, we make a decision on how much we're going to buy. We have to forecast that, and we go through it. It's a very detailed process to try to make those decisions. Our suppliers, because of the proportional markup discussion we had before, cannot offer us a different deal than what that markup permits. So it's not, I know what Southern does, we can't do those types of situations that you're asking about.
And perhaps I asked that incorrectly. It was my understanding that you were looking to harness your buying power, maybe not just for Pennsylvania, but perhaps for other states. Is that correct, or was I wrong in hearing that?
That's a concept that has been discussed. Governor Wolf and his initiatives have suggested that. In theory and on paper, it's a wonderful idea. There are a lot of vetting. There's a lot of vetting that needs to be done. We need to have the cooperation of the other states. We need to understand their laws so we can implement it. The federal government has to sign off on it. But we think it's a wonderful idea. The governor thinks it's a wonderful idea, and we intend to pursue it.
Thank you. And I guess from my closing comment is we talk a lot about consumers, and I think the way most of my constituents define privatization is for the husband to be able to go to the grocery store, buy a bottle of wine when he goes home and is going to cook dinner for his wife, or to be able to go to a convenience store to pick up a six-pack of beer. I think we're making it partway there with the restaurant license, but you know that's a significant hurdle for a lot of businesses. But if if we keep our eyes focused there, and I'll check with Charlie Caputo to see if maybe we can get a wine license in a grocery store. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.